Hi guys, Brian from Boas here. Let's face it, managing large numbers of boas can be challenging, but luckily there are some indispensable tools that make this job a lot easier. Today I'm going to go over my 3 indispensable tools for boa handling and management, and these are tools I would find it hard to even go for a whole day without. I just use them on such a regular basis, so be sure to stay tuned to see how they can make your boa handling and management life a lot easier. So to start with, this isn't an official endorsement for these tools. I'm going to mention a few brands, but I don't get paid money by these manufacturers. For full disclosure, I am a member of the Amazon Associates Partners Program, and there are some links below this ad, the description to this video rather. If you click on the links and end up buying some of these things from Amazon, I'll get a very small percentage. So it's a good way to support the channel if you're going to buy the item anyway. And I'll also say that all of these items are things that I have used and I'm 100% satisfied. I'm not going to recommend anything that I'm not happy with to my loyal viewers. Start off, I thought I'd show you a snake, a beautiful Branchia female Colombian boa, one of my more handleable and manageable boas, one that I probably don't need these tools, or all of the tools for at least, but nonetheless these tools do make interacting with all my boas a lot easier. So the first of these tools is a snake hook, and I bet this is no surprise to most of you guys. This is such an indispensable and ubiquitous tool for the snake keeper. And so I actually didn't use the snake hook until relatively recently. When I was a kid, with my first snakes some 40 years ago, I tried to make a snake hook out of one of my father's discarded golf clubs. Didn't really find many snakes growing up in Connecticut other than the occasional garter snake or water snake. But then when I had pet snakes, I just didn't use the snake hook. I would just reach in with my hands and grab them. And I usually wouldn't get bitten. Once or twice I think I ended up getting bitten, but it just wasn't that big of a deal. But then a few years ago I thought, well, I've got more and more snakes, and I'm kind of interacting with them a little more faster and faster, because I got more snakes. Maybe a snake hook would make things a little easier. And I looked around online and I settled on this one. This is a Midwest Tongs 24-inch cage hook. And incidentally, I like this hook a lot, but there are other really good brands as well. So I'd like to hear what's your favorite brand of snake hook. I would just stay away from the real cheap ones, the real flimsy or real small hooks. But this is a really well-built aluminum hook. This has a 24-inch shaft, an aircraft-grade anodized aluminum hook. They also make I think it's a 36-inch length. Basically the same hook, just a little longer. And that's more useful if you're doing field herping and catching snakes outside. Whereas the shorter size is a little easier to manage inside of a cage or in a snake room. And it works quite well. Thought I'd get a snake out. If you have a snake that's aggressive, often you can kind of hold one side with the hook like this and support the other side. And it gives the snake something to climb up. You can put some room between the biting end of the snake and your hand or face, which is helpful. The snakes seem to not mind climbing on it. Also, it's useful to use in the cage when you're announcing your presence. You might just want to gently tickle the snake's back with the snake hook. You can also kind of hook them. I don't usually hook them because I don't want to cause any injury. I mean, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to injure the snake, but it's a little sharp and you just want to be gentle with your boas. But snake hook works really well. It has multiple uses, and I depend on it for, sometimes when I'm reaching in a cage, it's kind of deep. I don't want to stick my whole hand in there, so it's kind of good to use the hook to kind of shepherd the snake around, and it makes handling just a little bit easier. So if you've been a little bit reluctant to pick one of these up until now, you definitely want to reconsider becoming a hooker, because it'll make your snake handling experience a whole lot easier. This next item is indispensable for measuring the temperature in your snake's enclosure, and it's just an infrared temperature gun. You just pull the trigger, and you can see that little red dot that tells you the temperature. So it's telling me my hand is 91.4 degrees Fahrenheit. You can switch it to Celsius also. This is the Actexity brand, available from Amazon. There's quite a few other brands as well. So this is an official endorsement for this brand. You know, any brand that works well will be a good fit for your snake handling. I believe these are about 20 bucks or so. They did go up quite a bit when the pandemic hit because people were using them to take temperatures of other people, so the demand was much higher. But you should be able to get one for not too much. I've seen some of these available at some of the reptile supply companies, and they're like over $100, which is kind of crazy. So you want to avoid anything that expensive. I'm not even sure why they're so much more expensive. But this is great for measuring multiple areas of your snake's cage. You can measure around the hot spot, see what the range is on the hot spot. You can see the depth of the heat. Sometimes, you know, right up against the bottom of the cage or tub will be much warmer than on the substrate. So there might be a gradient of a few degrees between the absolute bottom and on top of the substrate. And you can check the cool end as well. And usually when I'm doing my rounds and cleaning the cages, I always just do a quick check just to make sure that the animal's enclosure is still in the desired range. Often it will vary somewhat over the year, so I might bump up the temperature on the thermostat by a degree or two, or bump it down depending. And I just am constantly checking just to make sure. It's also very good just to make sure that nothing's going wrong with your heating and that the temperatures are all where they should be. In addition to measuring the temperature in your enclosure, you can also measure your snake directly itself, just simply by pointing on the snake and seeing what temperature it's at. And this is very useful for determining if your boa is gravid. If you have a gravid female boa, typically she'll be reading warmer than she would if she's not gravid. Most of my non-gravid boas typically read about 80 to 82 degrees on average. They don't usually hang out on the hot spot for that long. They might go over there to warm up, but probably about 75-80% of the time they're going to be on the cool end. So if you have a boa that's just hanging out on the hot spot, all coiled up, and you've bred her, chances are pretty good she's gravid. If you check her temperature, typically it'll be in the upper 80s, anywhere from about 85 to 90 degrees. And it's very easy to check that just with this temperature gun. You might also see that she's a couple degrees warmer than the surrounding environment. So she might be sitting on the hot spot. You might check the hot spot, it might be like 86 degrees, but the boa itself is 88 degrees. And that's a very good sign that you have a gravid boa. Likewise, if she's sitting there, but her temperature is not as hot as the hot spot, chances are she might not be gravid. Of course, boas are always going to move around, so even the gravid ones will move off the hot spot occasionally and might cool down a bit. So it's not 100% sure, but it's a pretty good way of getting a good idea whether your boa is gravid or not. So infrared heat gun, definitely an indispensable item that I use every day. The third indispensable item for boa handling and management is this grabbing tool. And this isn't even a specific brand. I picked it up at a local hardware store. I think it cost a few bucks. In fact, I've even gotten similar ones at the dollar store. They're not quite as long and the construction's a little cheaper, but they work okay. And they're $1.25, so you can't beat that if you can find them in stock. But this one, a little bit longer, and you can just grab the rodent, you do this to squeeze it, and you can present the rodent to your boa. And it works really well for feeding. I've never really used tongs. Some people use tongs. The tongs are a little bit more fiddly, and for a larger snake, tongs don't really cut it. You need a larger tool like this. This puts about 2.5 feet between the snake's head and your hand, so you don't want to get bitten. And it always amazes me when people are just hand feeding large constrictors. It's just dumb. It's just a recipe for disaster. People taking a whole rabbit, dangling it in front of a reticulated python with their bare hands. It's just idiotic. I know a lot of people on YouTube do these stunts because it gets views, but it's a recipe for disaster. You're going to get bit eventually, and these are the types of incidents that put the whole herp community in a bad light. So please, please, please don't do this. It's just dumb, okay? You don't want to get bit by a retic. But if you use one of these it greatly reduces the risk of being bitten. Again, a very inexpensive item, very easy to get, and definitely something I can't live without. My grabbing tool that allows me to feed my snakes without fear of getting bitten. So those are my 3 indispensable tools for boa handling and management. I hope it was eye-opening and somewhat entertaining. If you have any other tools that you find indispensable, I really like to hear about them if you can comment below. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to write them below or reach out to me, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.